Before we begin the Dharma talk, let's cultivate our motivation and have the aspiration to attain liberation and full awakening so that we can be of the greatest benefit to all living beings. Let's place what we're about to do now in sharing the Dharma together this evening very firmly in the context of compassion and service to society. And so we will listen and discuss together this evening with a kind heart to help each other learn the Dharma and progress on the path. Okay, so our topic for this evening is religious fundamentalism. Okay, so I want you to all know that whatever I say is completely right and you're not to question it. So before coming up here, I was talking a little bit with the two bunties about this topic. I wanted to pick their brains, so to speak, to get their ideas about it. And it came up that, this word fundamental can be and has been used in a variety of different ways. Yeah. So, for example, all of us, I think, want to practice the fundamental teachings of the Buddha. Yeah. In other words, the basic foundation teachings, the Dharma that the Buddha himself taught. Yeah, not something made up at all. And so in that way, it's fundamental. And Bhante Dhammika was commenting that at the beginning of the last century, there was a movement in some Western religions to go back to the fundamentals of the religion. Yeah? And that was a kind of fundamentalism. But it was basically just within one religion itself, or a branch of a religion, whatever it is, those people deciding that they wanted to go back to the fundamentals of their own tradition. Yeah. Nowadays, the word fundamentalism has really changed meanings, hasn't it? And it has very much nowadays the connotation of being closed-minded, even violent, extreme. Yeah, doesn't it? Isn't when you hear the word fundamentalism nowadays, that's the kind of connotation that we get. And it seems like almost every year fundamentalism becomes more fundamentalist. Yeah. And I've always thought that actually, all the fundamentalists in the world, they actually agree about a lot of things. And if you got them together, they would really agree, because each of them thinks my way is right and the others are wrong. Yeah, they all agree on that. Yeah. They just don't agree on which way it is, but they all say my way is right and the others are wrong. Yeah, everybody should do things my way, other ways are not acceptable. Or at least this is the connotation of fundamentalism now. nowadays. You know, so I always thought if you could have had a worldwide conference of fundamentalists, they, oh, you know, their tactics, their way of approach, they would, you know, they could have breakout sessions and, you know, share their techniques, and they would all agree. Yeah? And, you know, nowadays, unfortunately, fundamentalism, at least in the US, is more associated with Islam. I don't know here if it's more associated with Christianity. I'm not really sure. But every country I go to, or every religious, you know, people of different religions that I speak to, every religion has its own group of fundamentalists. Yeah, when I taught in Israel some time ago, they, you know, had really very orthodox fundamentalist people. And I mean, I've met Buddhist fundamentalists also. Yeah, and actually quite a variety of Buddhist fundamentalists. Yeah, we have a whole variety. You know, there's the Lotus Sutra fundamentalists. Yeah, the people who say the Lotus Sutra is the only one correct sutra. It's the best sutra. Every other sutra is inferior, and you don't need to study it. And everybody should study the Lotus Sutra. Yeah, and it becomes very difficult to talk to these people sometimes because they can't hear about any other sutra but the Lotus Sutra. And then you meet other Buddhists that are kind of fundamentalists on one particular practice. Yeah, you've got to do this practice. You know, if you don't do it, you're wrong. Or fundamentalists even about how you teach a practice. Yeah, like, do you get shamatha first and then vipassana? Or do you actually realize vipassana first and then shamatha? And everybody has their own positions, and, you know, we stake out our territory. Yeah. I've even met, and these people are not necessarily Buddhist, but vegetarian fundamentalists. Yeah, born-again vegetarians. Yeah. And I'm a vegetarian, but boy, when I'm with born-again vegetarians, whew, you know, they're really too much sometimes. Yeah. And then some people are even more extreme than born-again vegetarians. Because we had one man who came to the Abbey, and, you know, the Abbey's always been vegetarian. But once in a while, we will have eggs. And he asked, are the eggs from chickens that are free range? And I said, no. And he got very upset. You know, if you have eggs, they have to be free range chickens. And I said, we only accept the food that is given to us. We don't go out and buy food. And if people ask us what we want, we don't ask them for expensive food that they don't even buy for themselves. But he wouldn't take that as a good answer. Yeah. And he never came again. Because once in a blue moon, we will eat eggs that are not from free-range chickens. Okay. Yeah. So, in looking at this whole idea of fundamentalism, no matter what religion it comes, you know, in, I think there's some very common roots to it. Yeah, and I say this because I have some interesting karma to find myself sitting next to religious fundamentalists on long airplane flights. Yes. Yeah. one time I was with one guy who was talking about flying saucers as we flew from Singapore to the US. Yeah, he was a flying saucer fundamentalist. So much so that the flight attendant at one point came to me and said, "Would you like me to reseat you?" She knew what was going on. But other times it's just been usually, Christian fundamentalists. Although when I was in Israel, I met a lot of Jewish fundamentalists as well. Yeah. So, everywhere you go. So my take on it is this, my observation. And, you might like to contribute, later we have a little bit of discussion. Share your reflections. But my observation is that nowadays the world is, it's global. Yeah. News travels very quickly. The world is changing very quickly. We are faced with a number of significant issues that as a planet we need to take care of. What are we going to do about nuclear arms? Yeah, what are we going to do about climate change? What are we going to do about immigration and almost every country having a multi-ethnic population? Yeah, nowadays you can't find any, I don't think, or maybe just one or two countries in which the whole population is uniformly the same ethnic group and the same religion. Yeah. It's even in Saudi Arabia, which many people really consider fundamentalist, you have the Wahhabis and you have the Sunnis, and it's not a homogeneous population. So what are we going to do as a planet when we have countries where the population is not homogeneous? And even if it is homogeneous, we human beings still find something to fight over, don't we? Yeah. So in this kind of world where things are changing very fast, mass communication and so on, I think that many people feel rather insecure. Yeah, there's a feeling of insecurity, instability. And so in order to cope with it, people want to have an identity. Yeah, they feel, I need an identity in this global marketplace with so many religions and ethnicities and races and languages. I need an identity. I need a home group to which I belong. Yeah. And so people often adopt a religion or whatever as their own in a very fundamentalist way, kind of really grasping onto it. How the Buddha talks about the grasping at I and mine? Yeah? So grasping at religion in that way. I am a whatever it is. This is my religion. And in that way, feeling, okay, now I know who I am. And so I've seen in the States anyway, people who, for example, because I grew up in a Jewish family that was not religious at all. But I observed many people from very Reformed Judaism then becoming Orthodox Jews who were extremely strict, because in Judaism there's this whole thing about you don't cook a calf in its mother's milk. So you have to have 2 sets of dishes and two kinds of sinks and, every 2 kinds of ovens and, because God forbid, there's one molecule of milk that touches one molecule of meat, and you've transgressed God's order. And, I see people who grew up like not keeping kosher. This kosher is this kind of diet, and not keeping kosher, but then, wanting an identity, wanting to belong, becoming Orthodox Jews, and then keeping kosher, in a very extreme way. Somebody was recently telling me that, they went to a relative's house that was now kosher, and, she couldn't even help in the kitchen for fear of putting a fork in the wrong place. Yeah? Yeah. But these kinds of things, like, become a symbol of your identity and somehow a symbol of your religious purity. And you'll see in this example, milk and meat and one molecule of each, and, isn't that a bit extreme? In my view, it's a bit extreme. In their view, it gives them a sense of security in knowing who they are and doing the right thing. Yeah? And so, in the same way, in other religions, you find people, going back. I don't even know if they're really going back to the fundamentals of their own religion, or if they're picking out certain aspects and becoming fundamentalist about those aspects. For example, one airplane flight, I sat next to a young man, because the area of America where the Abbey is, there's a lot of, it's very, very conservative, and there's a number of people who are quite, some who are quite fundamentalist. He was a young man, and usually in America, young people are, stretching their wings, and they want to explore this and that, and they're quite liberal politically and like that. This young man, not at all. Yeah, very conservative. And he was telling me, he was only maybe 24, 25, yeah. So he was looking to start his career, and he wanted to get married, and he had this very specific idea of the way his marriage was going to be, yeah, that his wife was going to stay at home. She was not going to work, not allowed to work. Yeah, he would provide for the family, doing the version of what a man was from many centuries ago, And she was going to be in the role of a woman, as it was, a long time ago, and stay at home, have a lot of babies, never mind the fact that the world is overpopulated. Yeah, have a lot of babies. They weren't going to send their children to public school because that might corrupt them. They were going to homeschool their children. Yeah, and just completely like this. And I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I want, and he seemed very sure about finding a young woman who would go along with this. Yeah, because in America now, women, there's more women in the workplace, more women graduating from college than men. Yeah, in the workplace, maybe about equal, even though men get paid more. Yeah, but women are really, quite active in society and doing a lot of stuff. They're not stay-at-home moms baking cookies. Yeah, that's what people thought Hillary Clinton should do. Yeah, she was much too bright to bake cookies. Yeah, she left that for Laura Bush. yeah, whose husband was busy, what do you call it, assenting to torture in the CIA prisons. I shouldn't get diverted by talking about American politics, though. So it was quite interesting for me that he just had this idea of, how he was going to live and what it was going to be and be like. And I thought, wow, I wonder if he'll have a happy marriage, because I was thinking of a modern woman trying to live in that kind of relationship. I personally would go totally nuts.
Sounds like he's a Mormon.
Yeah, no, he wasn't a Mormon, actually. Yeah, it was just some other kind of Christian. Yeah. Then there was another flight where I talked to another young man. And he was telling me how, his, brand of Christianity was the one and only correct one. And how he was telling this to his mother so that he could, help her accept Jesus and be saved. And he wasn't getting along very well with his mother. Yeah. And, even though he, out of such great kindness, was trying to convert her, and he didn't understand why his mother was so not conforming to what he wanted. And I was sitting there going, I understand why. Because he was really pushing. Yeah. Because even with me, he was pushing. He said, what did he say? He had some little books. So he wanted to share his little books with me. Because we were on a long flight. He was talking. And so I said, oh, yes, I'll accept your little books. And I have a little book about Buddhism. Will you accept it? And he froze. Yeah. He was a young man. He must have been like 18, 19. He completely froze. And he didn't know what to do. Yeah. And then he said, my pastor would not like me to accept that. And so then I said, then unfortunately I'm not able to accept your gift either. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping maybe it made him think a little bit. Then there was another flight. I don't know why I'm telling you all these stories. But there was another flight seated next to somebody this man was older. He must have been in his 40s because he had several children. And we started, I was flying back. I'm dressed like this, so what are you? And I told him, and, we started talking. And so he again started telling me about how I should accept Jesus so I don't go to hell. And I decided with this person to take a little bit of a different tact. And I said, I'm quite offended by your telling me that I'm going to hell. Because I live an ethical life. I don't kill or steal. I'm celibate. Yeah, I don't lie. I try not to, create disharmony with my speech or use harsh words or idle talk. I try to control my mind and not covet things and have malicious thoughts and so on. So I kind of described, the 10 non-virtues that the Buddha talked about and how I was practicing abandoning those. And I said, if I abandon these, and I hold to the basic ethical tenets. Isn't that what your God is teaching also? To live as an ethical person, to practice forgiveness, to practice loving kindness for other people. So if I'm living like that, why would he send me to hell? I said, I'm actually really offended by your saying that. Because on one hand, you're telling me that your God is compassionate. On the other hand, you're telling me that he's very judgmental and he's going to send somebody who lives an ethical life to hell just not believing in him. And I said, that doesn't make much sense to me. And he didn't really know what to say at that point. Yeah, he could see what I was saying was correct. I just said it, just as I told you, in a very nice tone of voice. I wasn't at all belligerent. And he said, well, I was saying this to you out of compassion because I don't want you to go to hell. And I said, well, thank you very much, but to me, I don't feel like you're being compassionate. Yeah, I feel like you're being disrespectful. And I would like to be respected for my beliefs and for my conduct. Yeah. So I really kind of, in a very firm way, but I said that. So it's quite interesting. I'm hoping again there too that afterwards he thought about it. I think he did, I'm hoping he did. Okay? But I could tell you all about other people who are fundamentalists. But the real thing in this whole conversation is for all of us to look at ourselves and see where we are fundamentalist. Yeah. Because there's no way in the world that we're going to change all the fundamentalists in the universe. We cannot control other people. But we have to look inside and see where we're stuck, where we're closed-minded, where we're defensive. Yeah, because the only mind that we can even attempt ever to control or change is our own. Yeah. So we may not be particularly fundamentalists about Buddhism, although some people are, Whatever their Buddhist tradition is, they look at it like, I'm Theravada, I'm Mahayana, I'm Tibetan, I'm Mahayana, but the rest of you Mahayanas aren't right because you have to hold the Lotus Sutra as the best. Yeah? And all you Theravadas, I'm Theravada, but, you're not keeping the Vinaya properly, or whatever it is, So to really look at where we become judgmental of other people. And to ask ourselves, again, is our judgmentalism coming from a sense of insecurity that we want to find a group that we latch onto, and the group has very clear boundaries of what you need to be or do or think to be a member of it? Yeah? And so when you join a group like that, then you're not faced with thinking for yourself. You're given a set of principles and rules and told that this is the way it is. And don't think outside of this box, because it's dangerous if you do. And whatever supreme being they believe in said this, and therefore believe it and don't question. And so whether you're Buddhist or Christian or Jewish or Islam or Hindu or who knows what, when you're looking for an identity and a sense of security, and it's difficult for you to think for yourself because it's too confusing and it's too frightening to look at an issue from multiple perspectives. In that case, if that's your psychology, then you just want somebody to tell you what is right and what is wrong, what is the one true way, and follow it. Yeah. I even had about a year ago, a young man came to see me at the Abbey, and he was from a different Buddhist tradition, and we were talking about it, and he was saying, my tradition, does things this way. What does your tradition do? And he came to the Abbey because he really wanted to discuss and have a dialogue. So I was talking about him, to kind of within the various perspectives that, because the tradition I follow, there's a variety of perspectives. And within Buddhism, there's a variety of perspectives. And at one point he said to me, I just want to know which way is the right way. Yeah, it's too confusing for me to think of different perspectives. I just want to know the right way. And the thing is that maybe there isn't one right way. Yeah. And this is what I think is the skill of the Buddha when he taught, is that the Buddha knew that people had different kind of dispositions, different kind of mentalities, and that if he taught the exact same teaching to everybody, it wouldn't fit. Yeah, it's not one size fits all. Because some people, you need to teach them this because of where they're at this particular moment in their spiritual path. And other people, you need to teach that. So there may be one final view that is considered the highest view, but that view is not the best view for everybody. Okay? Because people are different, and what people need at different times in their spiritual path is different. Yeah? So maybe, within Buddhism, what we call the best is what is suitable for a particular individual at that time. So then there becomes many bests. You getting what I'm saying? Yeah? And to me, I consider this really demonstrates the Buddha's amazing skill as a teacher and his incredible compassion for sentient beings. Yeah? That he was able to, with his sensitivity and his psychic powers, know when he met any individual exactly what they needed to hear at that particular time. That may or may not be the highest view, but was the best view for that person at that time. And then later, they could change views and progress. And so even from a Buddhist view, when we look at other religions, okay, we can see that the people, let's say, we're Buddhist, we don't believe in a creator God, yeah? And we use reasoning to disprove the existence of a creator God. But when we meet people who believe in a creator God, we don't sit and attack them for what they believe, because what they believe helps them at that particular moment in time. you know. And so you hear the Dalai Lama when he teaches publicly, especially in the West, yeah, he'll say, because he'll have an audience of people, most of whom are not Buddhist, you know, and he'll say, you don't need to become a Buddhist. Yeah, if you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever, you can remain that. Yeah, but whatever you are, follow the ethical precepts in your own religion, because all the religions talk about not harming others physically, not taking their goods, not misusing sexuality, not lying, yeah, not losing our temper at people. All of the religions talk about that. So he says, you know, if you're a Christian and you think everybody's created in the image of God, then that gives you a reason to be kind to every living being, because you believe in God and you respect God. So if living beings are God's creation, then you need to be kind and respect living beings. And he says, do that, and that's good. Yeah. Now, of course, as Buddhists, we might have a different reason for being kind to sentient beings. Yeah. And our reason works for us. Yeah. That reason works for people with that kind of mentality. So that way of thinking is best for them. You know, after a while, you know, if they create some good karma by keeping good ethical conduct, you know, maybe later this lifetime, maybe in a future lifetime, then their mind becomes, because of they've created karma through keeping good, they've created virtuous karma through keeping good ethical conduct, then they'll have their mind will open, and they may begin to question things, and they may adopt a Buddhist view at another time later on, because that will come to make more sense to them. Yeah. And at that time, then the Buddhist view is the right one for them. Yeah. So it's very interesting, and I think this is really one of the Buddhist strong points, is that we don't go around waving a flag saying, my football team is best, and everybody has to root for it. Yeah. We're able to look beyond names and categories, you know, and encourage people to live good lives, no matter what religion they are, and respect them because they live a good life. Yeah. And we can do that, and at the same time know that we're Buddhist, and if those people try and convert us, just say, thank you very much, I have my own religion, and that's it. Yeah. That's what I do, you know. It's quite interesting, you know, we have a Buddhist monastery, and sometimes we'll get, who comes to our door? Jehovah's Witnesses sometimes. Yeah, they'll come to the door of a Buddhist monastery. Can you imagine? Yeah, and they want to talk to us, and I always say to them, thank you very much, we're Buddhist, yeah, but your religion taught some very good things about ethical conduct, kindness, and forgiveness, and I'm sure if you practice that, it will benefit you very much. Thank you and goodbye. Yeah? And that's it. I'm very firm, yeah, because I know it doesn't, you know, I don't want to use my time in a dialogue that isn't an actual dialogue, yeah. So I just encourage them in what they're doing and send them on their way, yeah. On the other hand, we have some friends in the local area who are Catholic nuns, and we'll meet with them from time to time, and we really have a lot in common. And we're, I mean, they believe in God and we don't, but that's incidental, because with them, we'll often talk about women's role in religion. Yeah. And what do you think about women becoming priests? Yeah. It's the same thing in Buddhism. What do you think about bhikshuni ordination and letting the women take full ordination? And we'll ask them, and they're quite open-minded. So we're able to talk about what the Vatican is saying. Yeah, and they'll really tell us what they think. They don't feel like they have to hold up the church at all costs. Yeah, they feel like they can share their own opinions, which differ from the church with us. Yeah. So we have many, many interesting conversations. So people who I can really dialogue with, I dialogue because I quite enjoy that. Yeah. But people who you can't dialogue with, I just am very firm and that's it. Yeah. But like I said before, the real thing is to look inside and, how much do we appreciate the variety of Buddhist traditions? Yeah, do we respect all the different traditions? And can we distinguish, people who call themselves Buddhist but don't really follow what the Buddha taught from people who are genuine Buddhists? And how do we deal with those people? And how do we make sure we don't become one of those people? Yeah? And invent our own kind of Buddhism according to what fits our own ego. Yeah? Because there's a lot of people, they don't like, I'm telling you a lot of stories tonight. I was at a Buddhist teachers conference in New York State about 2-3 years ago. And in the US, there's a number of lay teachers. Yeah. And I was very surprised at this conference that there were many lay teachers, and about half of them were not sure if they believed in rebirth. And I was like, yeah, because this is a kind of a core belief in Buddhism.
Fundamental.
Yeah, it's a fundamental.
Real fundamental.
Yeah. And okay, not all Buddhists, are convinced in rebirth. Yeah. But most people will accept it provisionally or put it on the back burner or whatever. But if you're a Buddhist teacher, to not believe in rebirth or not be sure if you do, I thought that was very peculiar. Yeah? Very peculiar. So, yeah. So I think it's very important really to assess teachers and within, different traditions. And His Holiness Dalai Lama always recommends, when you're looking at teachers, attend their talks and see if they're teaching the basic fundamental principles of the Dharma or not. Yeah. And let that be the initial way that you check out a teacher. Okay, so I've kind of rambled on and on, telling you lots of stories. What I'd like you to do now is ask some questions or make some comments. We can have a bit of a discussion. Yes?
2 days ago, you were giving a talk on the path to Nirvana.
Uh-huh.
My question is, can a woman be enlightened as a woman?
Okay, so he's saying 2 days ago I was giving a talk on the path to nirvana, and his question is, can a woman be enlightened as a woman? He is very courageous to ask that question, isn't he?
We're talking about women, sir.
Yes, that's why I mean, you're sitting in a room with a lot of women. Yeah. And we're strong women, aren't we? And we're not going to take any of this blah, blah stuff. Yeah. Yes, the Buddha said you can be enlightened as a woman. Why not? Are you inherently a man? Are you inherently a woman? On what basis is our sex determined? On the basis of a conglomeration of atoms and molecules in your body. Yeah? Is a formation of atoms and molecules who you are? Is that your identity? Yeah, we aren't our body, are we? We are not our body. And our mind, does our mind have gender? Do you have a woman's mind or a man's mind? The mind is formless. How can you say it's from one sex or the other?
Well, there's the book that says men are from Mars and the
Women are from Venus, yes. Yeah. Okay. So this is something, actually, I feel that in Buddhism nowadays, we need some modernization. There's certain, Buddhists who are extremely conservative when it comes to women. Yeah. And I think if Buddhism is going to make it in the 21st century in modern societies, we have to have gender equality. Except when it comes to carrying heavy things. Then the guys can do it. Okay, but this is one very strong tenet at Sravasti Abbey. Yeah, gender equality. And it's quite interesting because I meet many men in the West who are, when they hear, about some of the statements about women, either in the scriptures or made by some teachers, they're very upset by it. The men are upset. Yeah. So we didn't jump on you and beat you up.
That's why I use the word as a woman. I realize that thing. Buddhism are supposed to be, are in fact peaceful. Buddhists are supposed to be peaceful, non-aggressive.
Yes.
But today we hear about Buddhism in Thailand, in Burma, not by the Buddhists, but by the monks themselves.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. This is what's happening in Burma is a good example of Buddhist fundamentalism. And in one way, it actually isn't even Buddhist, because they're not citing Buddhist tenets as a reason for suppressing the Rohingya people. Yeah, they're just using the name Buddhism, and it's an ethnic conflict, which they're making into a religious conflict. And it's disastrous. And, I get asked about this a lot in the West because people usually do look at Buddhism as a peaceful religion. And they say, what in the world is going on in Burma? And I say, I don't understand it either, and I totally do not agree with it. And I'm sure if the Buddha were alive today, he would not agree with, what the Buddhists in Burma are doing towards the minority population of the Rohingya. Yeah, and I think it's important as Buddhists that we speak out about this. I don't know anybody in Burma to talk to. People sometimes say to me, "Can you help change this?" I don't know anybody, But I can say that the people who are doing this are improperly invoking Buddhism as a reason for discrimination, whereas in Buddhist tenets themselves, there is no such discrimination. And, if you're really following Buddhism, you would not have that kind of attitude towards a minority population.
I think it's similar to the Islam problem.
Yeah.
A Muslim would say, we will not do things as those jihadis are doing, using the name of Islam.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's very similar to, what the fundamentalist Muslims are doing. Yeah, that doesn't at all represent Islam in general. Yeah. There's another.
Thank you, Venerable, for sharing. My main questions on fundamentalism. One is, if you see friends becoming more fundamentalist in their thinking and their deeds, what are some skillful ways to help them? And secondly is how to prevent ourselves from becoming fundamentalistically against people who are fundamentalists.
Okay. Can you, the first one, how to help friends, can you give me an example?
For example, something that's more particularly disturbing to me is when my longtime Buddhist friends, some of them who used to see themselves as Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhists and kind of consciously or unconsciously looked down on Theravada Buddhism, suddenly encountered early Buddhism, and suddenly, because of various reasons, thoughtfully decided that Vajrayana and Mahayana, Vajrayana is definitely Hinduism, and Mahayana, all that is like an exaggeration, and only selected early Buddhist thinking is proper Buddhist, and has maybe in their enthusiasm are trying to convert us. To help us.
So friends who used to be Mahayana and practiced Tibetan Buddhism, then learning Theravada and becoming fundamentalist Theravadas and trying to convert you. And you're wondering what they're going to believe next week. Yeah?
I mean, for me, it hurts because, first of all, when you're practicing Tibetan Buddhism, you're not even supposed to look down on Theravada Buddhism.
Exactly.
And secondly, when you practice Theravada Buddhism, you're not supposed to then think that the others are bad.
Yeah.
And I'm very disturbed by this kind of thinking.
Yeah. And this, unfortunately, we find this kind of thinking too much in the Buddhist world. And it comes, because people, you see here why the Buddha said that grasping at the true existence of the person is the source of samsara. Because everybody who thinks my group, my Buddhism is the best and yours is inferior, is grasping at inherent existence, which shows that they're, they have the fundamental ignorance is very present in their minds, but they're not seeing it. Yeah. And actually, in the Mahayana, and Tibetan Buddhism is a branch of Mahayana, there's specific precepts about not criticizing the Theravada. And that you break your bodhisattva vows if you criticize the Theravada. And yet you find people doing this because of this grasping, this self-grasping. And because, again, maybe I need one, just tell me what the right way is. And of course, whatever I believe is the best way. So this kind of sounds like your friends think. I'm Tibetan Buddhism, so what I believe now, I'm a Tibetan Buddhism, that's the right way. Then they become Theravada. Now I believe in Theravada, that's the right way. And that's why I tried to make a joke, because you're not sure what they're going to believe next week, because whatever they believe next week will be the right way for them. Yeah? And so I think with people like this, it's important to really point out that the Buddha taught the Buddha Dharma. The Buddha did not teach Theravada. The Buddha did not teach Mahayana. He did not teach, Chan. He didn't teach Pure Land. He didn't teach Huayan. He didn't teach Tantra. He taught the Buddha Dharma. Yeah. And this is one reason that there's a new book that just came out by His Holiness Dalai Lama that I was able to co-author, called Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions. Yeah? And this whole thing, like I said before, this is really showing the greatness of the Buddha as a teacher, that he taught many traditions. So with your friends, I would, really point out that we all have the same teacher. And if we disparage any of the Buddhist traditions, we're disparaging the Buddha as the teacher, because all of those traditions are rooted in what the Buddha taught. If your friends are trying to convert you and pressure you and criticize you because you don't practice their brand of Buddhism, you just say, thank you very much. What you're saying is not helpful. Yeah. And I would like to be respected for what I believe in. I would like you please to respect all of the Buddha's teachings. Yeah. And there is no need to have this kind of debate about who is the one right one. Because the basic point is we are all in samsara, aren't we? So what are you going to do? You want to be the best person in samsara? Yeah? That's what it's like. I want to be the best person. Whatever I think is best, I want to be the best person in samsara. It doesn't matter if you're the best person in samsara or the worst person in samsara. As long as you're in samsara, you're stuck. Yeah? And so how about if we all work together so we can all get out? That's the point. Yeah? That this kind of debate is not at all helpful to our own personal practice, because our own personal practice involves looking deep in our own mind. Yeah? And do I have ignorance in my mind? How can I recognize the fundamental ignorance in my own mind? Can I recognize when I have craving and attachment? Can I recognize when I have anger? That's what we need to be looking at. Yeah? Because we're not going to get liberated by arguing over details. We're going to get liberated by looking at our own mind and seeing how we personally need to improve. And so I would say that to them. And if they keep pushing, then you just distance yourself. Yeah? Or tell them to go to the conference of all the international fundamentalists. Where they'll get along very well with all the others. Yeah. And let me just add also, tell your friends, say what you're saying is very hurtful to me, and I need respect. Yes.
Venerable, thank you so much for bringing up the issue about layman teachers on reincarnation. That has been something that's very difficult for me as well. When I started on Buddhism about 5 years ago, it's got a lot of good inner reflection for myself in the sense that I recognize the mindset and how I look at people differently to be more compassionate. But that step across, and I believe in karma as well, but that step across reincarnation has always been very difficult for me. I confess I've not seen a lot of deaths closely. There was one that happened to me. Somebody very dear to me passed away. And what shocked me a lot was at that moment, I actually cannot sense or feel the progression of reincarnation. As in, at that point in time, I recognized that life is over. And I felt that was that. So is it possible you can share with me, please, on how to view reincarnation in a more holistic manner?
Okay, very good question. How to view rebirth. Let's use the word rebirth. Okay, because I didn't grow up believing in rebirth. I thought there was just this life and then basta finito. That was it. Okay. So I had to go through a process myself to believe in rebirth. But what I thought about is, everything that functions arises due to causes. Yeah? Doesn't it? If you look in the material world, everything that exists arose due to causes. When we talk about the non-material world, like our mind, which is not something that's made out of atoms and molecules like the brain is. The mind is something different. The mind also, comes about due to causes. Yeah. Can you accept that the mind is something different than the brain? Okay. So, the physical things, you can look at the causes. Science is very good at analyzing the causes of physical things. Science does not understand the mind at all because the mind is not something you can measure with scientific instruments, because scientific instruments only apply to things that are made out of atoms and molecules, okay, which the mind isn't. The mind is the nature of clarity and awareness. Yeah. But if we look, and you sit here and you have a sense of your mind, that cognizes, feels, experiences, all these, the cognitive part of you. Yeah? So this moment of mind had a cause, the previous moment of mind. Yeah? That previous moment of mind also had a cause. It couldn't come from nowhere. Yeah? It came from the previous moment of mind. And so in that way, we can trace back the continuity of mind, to when we were 5 years old, when we were an infant, even back into the womb, Of course, when we were in the womb, our mind was not in the same state as it is now. Now we have language and everything like that. But still in the womb, there was consciousness. Yeah. Then you trace it back to the time of conception where the mind joined the fertilized egg. Now we know the continuity of the fertilized egg, the material continuity of that. But where did that first moment of mind that entered into the fertilized egg come from? Yeah. It had to have a cause, because nothing can arise and exist without a cause. Nothing can happen without a cause. Because if there's no cause, what causes something? you know? So that first moment of mind in this life had to have a cause. And just as, as we were going backwards from now, each moment of mind was caused by a previous moment of mind. Well, that first moment of mind of this life was caused by a previous moment of mind. Okay? The mind of the moment before the beginning of this life. Okay? And then that mind had a cause also, the previous moment of mind. And so in this way, you see that each moment of mind, each moment of clarity and awareness arose from a cause, the previous moment of clarity and awareness. And there was no beginning to that. Yeah. So that's going backwards. Going forwards, each moment of mind produces the next moment of mind. And at the time of death, what happens? Well, at life, the body and mind are associated and they affect each other. At death, what's happening is the body and mind, their continuities separate. Yeah. The body gets cremated, becomes ash, or the worms eat it, whatever. Yeah, so there's a physical continuity. For the mind, there's a mental continuity of one moment of mind producing the next moment of mind. Yeah. When that mind is covered by ignorance and has, created karma, polluted karma in the past, then that mind is attracted towards another rebirth. It's attracted towards another body. Yeah, it craves to have another body, another identity. And so it gets reborn. Yeah. What we want to do is stop the ignorance and stop the craving. Okay, and in that way stop the cycle of rebirth. But even when you stop the cycle of rebirth, there's nothing that can stop one moment of clarity and awareness from producing another moment of clarity and awareness. Yeah. And that's why, from the viewpoint of some Buddhist schools, yeah, the Buddha's mind continues to exist today. Yeah. Because there's nothing that can stop the existence of the mind. But the Buddha's mind is pure. The Buddha does not get reborn due to ignorance and craving, because all the defilements have been eliminated. But instead, out of love and compassion and altruism, the Buddha is able to manifest in many different forms to teach us. Okay, does that make some sense when you think about it in terms of cause and effect? Yeah, it does make sense, doesn't it? Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Just now we were discussing about the Myanmar and Rohingya. What we essentially mentioned is that we Buddhists are very peace-loving, non-violent, compassion, and so on. And it's very sad to see that Tibet is a peace-loving, religious people. They pray, the whole life, whole country, peace-loving and practice the Dharma. But what happens, you see, the communists just walk over them. Well, you can see that the Tibetan people, they are holding joystick. They cannot fight against the communists with a rifle. We can see them. Myanmar actually, what they are actually stand up for their own right. Otherwise, they will be run over by these fundamentalists or whatever, troublemaker. So I think that first we Buddhists are too compassionate and become passive, religion.
Okay, it's an interesting perspective. You know, one thing that I look at is right around 1949, 1950, that's when the Palestinians lost their, they had been living in Palestine, and when Israel was founded, then many Palestinians became refugees, and they've been trying to establish a Palestinian state and be free, be self-governing since, around that time, 1947, 48, 49, 50. That was about the same time, 49, 50, of when the Tibetans lost their freedom, when the communist Chinese marched into Tibet and took it over. Okay, since that time, both the peoples, the Palestinians and the Tibetans, have wanted to have their own autonomy, have wanted to be self-governing. If you look at the way the Palestinians have handled their conflict, a lot of people have died, haven't they? Beginning in when there were in the Olympics, when they killed some of the Israeli athletes, all the different intifadas, so many things, in the last 60 plus years of the Palestinians being violent, and still they don't have their own country, do they? The Tibetans have not been violent during that time, and His Holiness Dalai Lama specifically tells them not to hate the Chinese communists. He says not hate the Chinese, the communists. He's not too fond of communism, although he says he himself is a socialist. Anyway, beyond that, the point is that the Tibetans have been largely nonviolent. Yeah. And if you look, neither the Palestinians nor the Tibetans have their own country now. But how many people have died in the Palestinian struggle? And how many lives have been saved in the Tibetan struggle because they haven't been violent? Yeah. So I think that's saying something. Yes.
Hi. Okay. Thank you, Barbara. I wish to address a bit about the rebirth thing. It's a good thing that Barbara shared about the logical reasoning for believing in rebirth. Then there's also an empirical side to it. You can Google on your smartphone, Ian Stevenson. He and along other independent researchers interview a lot of children around the world, and there are thousands of cases where the children remember past previous lives details about previous parents and how they died. And when they go to investigate, and they found that what the children say to a lot of details, up to 50 plus details, almost all are correct. So all these things are not obtainable by the children, they are normal needs. And they also check whether the parents believe in rebirth or not, whether the family is a Christian or not, Buddhist. There are many cases of all different backgrounds. So this is empirical evidence that rebirth exists, which I find that a lot of Buddhists are not aware of this. So it's good to share. And also I'm taking Bachelor of Arts in Buddhism, and I find that learning that I have to learn about pre-Buddhist India and about Jainism, materialism, and Gnostics. Even then, there's all sorts of philosophical thoughts back then. And it really opens up my mind to be impartial about the different sectarians of Buddhism and even different religions. And can just see that the existence of different religions is due to causes and conditions, and that the most important thing is to practice what is currently best for us. And to really get out the samsara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and also, like, what is the differences between rebirth and reincarnation?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, samsara, the English term is cyclic existence. And basically what this means is being reborn again and again under the influence of ignorance and craving and polluted karma created in, during our lives through the afflicted mental states. So that's what the meaning of samsara is. Samsara is not a place. Yeah. It's taking a body and mind that are not free, that are under the influence of ignorance and afflictions. The difference between rebirth and reincarnation, it depends who you ask, because it's language and it's words. And so for some people, the two words are synonymous. For other people, they say they want to differentiate the meaning of the two words, because they say that reincarnation implies the existence of a soul. And of course, Buddhism, the Buddha doesn't believe in a permanent self or soul. So it just depends on how you like to use the word reincarnation. The basic meaning, in Buddhism is that there's no permanent self or soul that's reborn. Okay. Okay, are we ready to
Well, I would like to find out, is it okay for us to practice different schools like Theravada and Mahayana at the same time? Yes, so it will be get become fundamentalist at once.
Okay. So is part of you going to go, I'm Theravada, and the other part of you going, I'm Mahayana. And inside you, there's this civil war going.
The flip side of that question is it okay to not believe in any school and just focus on practice?
Yeah, the flip side is it's okay to not believe in any school and just focus on practice. Everything depends on the individual and how you do things. Yeah. If you have a correct understanding of the Buddhist teachings, then you can incorporate teachings from all the traditions into your own practice. If you don't have a correct understanding of the Buddhist teachings, even in your own tradition, you're not going to do, you're going to go amok. Okay? For me, working on this book has been just a tremendous opportunity because, I when I became a Buddhist, I was just in the Tibetan community in India. It wasn't until I came to Singapore in 1987 that I began to learn about other kinds of Buddhism. And like I said, coming to the Buddhist library to teach and going to different temples to teach and learning about different kinds of Buddhism. And so for me, personally, it's like I have one tradition that's kind of my home tradition, but I incorporate elements of all the different traditions into my practice. Yeah. And I read the sutras of all of the different traditions because, they all basically say a lot of the same things. And according to what I want to emphasize at a certain point, I'll read, sutras or scriptures of a different, one tradition or the other. Some traditions I understand better than others. Yeah. But I can see the Buddhist, thought in all of them. Okay. On the other hand, I would not advise somebody to Monday night you do Theravada, Tuesday night you do Huayan, Wednesday night you do Chan, Thursday night you do Pure Land, Friday night you do something else. If you're like that, you're not going to get, you're gonna have soup. Okay? Spiritual soup.